The fourth of the Introduction to the Modern United Nations video lessons. We've done the core procedures, and in reality, you can get to that point and pretty much function quite well in the Modern United Nations, picking up the rest as you go along. So this is much more of an optional session where it's about a little bit more of the sort of more niche or smaller rules that one has options to use in the Modern United Nations. So these are the procedures which aren't essential, but you can choose to use in order to help what you want to happen. Okay, so I would suggest some of these it's good to understand what they are, because they will be happening around you. But if you don't have the confidence to use them or know when to use them, do not stress, because you'll grasp it very quickly. So generally, our objective, if you remember, is to take a resolution and edit, remove, or amend items from it. And the Modern United Nations has a very strict order and procedure of how you do this, because otherwise you won't have anything productive done, because you'll just have lots of people arguing over each other. It is important to follow these procedures, and the process of how one does this has been covered in the previous session. And you can go round and round on that sort of circuit almost for the entire day. There are, however, a couple of procedures which break these rules, either pause it or will change or interrupt it before it carries on going. So although the cycle keeps on going, there are ways to interrupt it and pause it through motions or points. Now, there are a number of motions and points, and we're only going to focus on the fundamental ones or the big ones in this video lesson, but there are plenty more that you can look at in your own time in the instructional guide given to you previously. So before we look at the procedures themselves, it's important to realize when you are making suggestions to edits to understand what is going on in a resolution. And there are three distinct areas of any resolution. The top, as you highlight there, is often known as the details. These are the signatories, the sponsors, the committee, and the title. So this is very much for giving information about who does what. Now, this matters more in sort of a more traditional rule set where you're playing resolutions, because if you propose a resolution, you have some special options available to edit this for free without having a vote, something called a friendly amendment. Because in the system we currently do, because of the time pressure, we generally do not have nations who are actually in play being proposers of these various resolutions. And so it's generally not a major thing. However, if you are a proposer of a resolution, if you are a country that has made this resolution and has it signed under your name, then you have the right to do something called a friendly amendment. A friendly amendment is an amendment that you accept, and you're the writer, so it's kind of fine. Yeah, if the writer of the resolution accepts the amendment, it shouldn't be controversial to edit it. So it's a good way, if you propose a resolution, to edit it and to get people on board. You don't need to have a vote for a friendly amendment. You just need to inform the secretary and the chair that you've edited it slightly for a friendly amendment. This very rarely comes up, and when it does, it generally tends to be one of the crisis General Assembly sessions, as opposed to committee sessions. The next stage is something called the preambulatory clauses. The preambulatory clauses are almost the statements of principle. They are not instructions. They are more a description of what the UN's position on a given issue is, how it feels about it. So it doesn't necessarily have the force of law, but it does give context to what is about to happen in the third area. So it's a lot about description, ideals, but very little instruction. Okay, it's much more about statements of principle and those ideas. So it might be believing that human rights are important rather than punishing people who abuse human rights, which is the third element, which is called the operative clause. The operative clauses are noted because they are bullet pointed and they end in semicolons. Okay, operative clauses are instructions. They are orders. They are clear definitions of who does what, and they tend to have more legal force. So we will sanction XYZ. People who do this will have this. We will build this thing. We'll pay for this thing. And operative clauses, therefore, tend to be more important, and they tend to be more focus, have more focus of people's time, because they tend to have a greater force. When you are making amendments, you need to make clear what you are talking about, the preambulatory clause or the operative clause, number 3. Okay, and make sure you understand the difference between the two. Once again, preambulatory clauses are much more philosophical, much more about principles, and much more about how the UN feels about a given thing. The operative clauses is much more, and we will do this. And that tends to therefore have more legal force and be done a little bit more. So, there are a number of different points and motions that one can make. Now, we are only going to be talking about a very small number, which tend to come up quite a lot, because this is mainly designed, these videos are mainly designed to get you up to a speed at which it kind of makes sense when you do your first session. Now, there are many more that you can make use of as you go along. So, motions generally follow a very simple system. Someone proposes the motion. There is the chair sees if there is support for the motion. So generally it depends on the motion, but generally it'll be a second, or if there's 12.5% support, and then there'll be a vote on it, yes, no, or abstain. There usually isn't time for a debate on most motions, although some do have the right to debate, which is explained in the instructions themselves. So if you want to pass a motion, you will basically raise your placard for the chair. You'll say, Mr. Chairman or Ms. Chairman, the right honourable delegate from South Korea or Republic of Korea, I wish to propose a motion. The chair will get, I understand. Is there anyone who supports? They see their support. Let's have a vote. Those in favour, those against, those abstain. If it passes, then the motion will happen as described. Now, there's only one major motion, or technically two, but it's the same structure, which we will be looking at today, and that is caucuses. Now, caucuses are about almost suspension of the rules of procedure. So you know that cycle we went through last time? It's you going, we're going to temporarily, for a certain amount of time, usually 10, 20, 30 minutes or an hour, put that to one side and to allow people to talk and converse individually. So whereas before you couldn't talk at all while the rules of debate are going on unless you've been invited to talk, whereas before you couldn't get out your seat, you couldn't interrupt, you couldn't move around before, in a caucus those rules are off. Now there's two types of caucuses. So if you imagine that this U shape is a U shape of a conference, and the chair will be speaking at the very top of this page, okay? And each colour is a different person. So green and yellow sit next to each other, red and blue sit next to each other, and so on. Okay, a first caucus is something called a moderated caucus. A moderated caucus allows you to remain in seat but talk amongst yourselves. You can't get out of your seat, but you may talk to your neighbours and your pairs, or if you were sat in groups, your group. This is the rarer type because it's not massively helpful. And it's only really helpful if you're in a general assembly where everyone in the same team is next to each other and they may need to discuss what they think about something. So moderated caucus is where people remain in the seats, but the rules about who can talk when are currently subsequently limited, so, for example, don't happen, and you can therefore talk amongst yourselves without being punished. Now, the moderated caucus will exist for a certain amount of time. In that time, you can talk about whatever you want. Once that time is over, the same rules of debate with speakers, support, time limits, lists, times, speeches, and votes all happening. The other type of caucus is known as an unmoderated caucus. These tend to be more popular because they're actually more helpful. Unmoderated caucus is the same basic logic for caucus. The rules of debate are suspended. You can talk and you don't have to do all the debates in turn, but also you're allowed to get out of your seat. This allows you to make alliances, have quiet conversations with individuals around the room who you would not be sat next to. This is often seen as the glue of modern United Nations because very often it's about compromise or making deals with other nations to help each other on certain actions, building coalitions. So you can propose an unmoderated caucus if you feel it'd be helpful to have a little bit of a quiet conversation in private with another couple of members of different member states about a given issue to negotiate your position. You will propose the motion, there will be seen of support, and there'll be a vote on it. The chair will then set a time limit, and for that time limit you can get out of your chair, you can chat up to various member states off the record without necessarily following the rules of debate. So moderated and unmoderated caucuses seem confusing, but essentially it's you're allowed to talk off the record, you're allowed to get out of your chairs. It's a temporary suspension of the procedures. Generally, most people will ask for unmoderated caucuses because they are more useful. Just being able to talk to people sat next to you is less helpful than being able to talk to whoever you want, particularly in private. Apart from moderated caucuses and unmoderated caucuses, which are motions, and there are a couple of other motions, as mentioned before, that you can find in your instructional guide, the other thing you can do is points. Points are more about very short snippets of information. There are lots of points, but the primary two are points of order and points of information. Points of order are when a member state feels like a rule or procedure has been violated. This can be decorum. Someone might use not refer to another delegate in the right way, which is obviously the Right Honourable Delegate from Madagascar, for example. It might be that someone's broken some rules. It might be that we have forgotten to do one stage of the process. If an individual feels like a part of the procedure, the rules of the UN, model United Nations have been broken, they can interrupt a speaker mid-speech and simply say the phrase point of order. All you can say is point of order. The chair will stop the debate, stop the timer, ask for the point of order. They will then rule on it, maybe vote on it, but usually they will rule on it. And if they believe that you're correct, they will act accordingly. If they think you're incorrect, they will act accordingly. And then the speech will resume. So it's like a pause. So say if someone's giving a talk and they use slanderous language against, they might say, the criminals from Saudi Arabia. A Saudi Arabian delegate might go, point of order. The chair will cease to stop the debate, knowing probably what's about to happen, and say, okay, right delegate from Saudi Arabia, would you please stop speaking for a little bit, or right delegate from Georgia, whoever said it, would please stop talking, and ask the person who asked the point of order, what is your point of order? They'll say, they accused the leadership of this particular country of being criminals. That is against the rules of decorum. I wish you to sanction them. The chair will rule. That was against the rule of decorum. I'm going to warn you, Georgia, for breaking the decorum. Do it again, and there will be a further sanction. That is it. The final point is something called a point of information. If you wish to add information or add something to what is said or what is currently being said by a debater, by someone speaking, then you may. Now, you can't just interrupt. You have to say point of information. Point of information is you going, I wish to add something. And what you normally do is the speaker is speaking, say they're speaking about global health, and you go point of information. If you go point of information, it is up to the speaker if they accept you or deny you. If you want to say something, they don't want you to say it. They'll just say denied. If they say accepted, they allow you to talk. Generally, it is unwise to let an opponent speak, because obviously they're just going to undermine you. If, however, an ally says point of information, it might be more worthwhile letting them speak, because they might have come up with a particularly good idea to help support your arguments. Either way, all you say is accepted or denied if you're the speaker, and follow accordingly. If a speaker is constantly getting bombarded with points of information, then this chair might rule no further points of information from certain people or at all for the duration. So, point of order. Someone's broken the rules, you say it to the chair. Point of information. You want to add something or challenge something said by the speaker, and the speaker decides accept or decline and carries on talking or stops talking, depending if they accept or decline your point of information. Again, as mentioned before, these motions and these points are not necessarily essential to do well in modern United Nations, and you'll get the hang of this seeing over time, but this might be useful to make sense of more experienced players often using points of information and points of order, and you not sure what they are. So, moderated caucuses and unmoderated caucuses are vital means to try and get the glue, try and have quiet conversations, try and build alliances and deals and coalitions. And points of order and information are vital to help sustain debate and challenge rule breaking. The thing we often confuse people about points is you can interrupt the speaker. However, you can't just blurt out. You just say the phrase point of order, point of information, and the chair then or speaker then decides, depending if it's a point of order or point of information. So hopefully this has been useful. Next session, last session, we're looking at how to prepare. But for now, hopefully this has been helpful, and I wish you the best of luck going forward.